James and Emma Thompson had saved their money for 10 years. They both worked hard jobs. James taught science at the local high school, and Emma ran a small accounting business. Now, they finally had enough for a down payment on their dream car. "Today's the day," James said with a smile as they drove to Premier Motors. Emma squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with excitement. The showroom was huge and sparkled with clean, shiny cars. Men and women in neat suits walked around helping customers. James and Emma looked at each other and took a deep breath before walking in through the glass doors. "It's beautiful," Emma whispered as they walked past the newest models. The smell of leather and new cars filled the air. They stopped in front of a sleek black sedan with chrome wheels. "This is the one we saw online," James said, running his hand gently over the smooth paint. They stood there waiting for someone to help them. 1 minute passed. Then 5. Then 10. James looked around. There were plenty of salespeople, but none came over to them. He saw a young salesman named Oliver standing nearby. "Excuse me," James said politely. "My wife and I are interested in this model. Could you tell us more about it?" Oliver barely looked at them. His eyes quickly moved over their simple clothes. "This one starts at £60,000, he said in a bored voice. "Maybe you'd prefer our budget dealership across town? They have better payment plans." Emma's cheeks turned red. "We know the price," she said firmly. "We'd like to test drive it, please." Just then, a tall man with gray hair walked over. His name tag said Richard, sales manager. He smiled, but his eyes were cold. "I'm afraid all our test cars are being used today," Richard said. "You should have made an appointment." As he said this, a couple in expensive clothes walked in. Richard immediately turned away from James and Emma. "Welcome to Premier Motors," he called out cheerfully to the new customers. "How can I help you today?" James felt a knot in his stomach. He had faced unfair treatment before, but it still hurt every time. He took Emma's hand, which was now shaking slightly. "Let's go," he said quietly. "We don't need to shop where we're not wanted." They walked out with their heads held high, but the joy had gone out of their special day. Neither noticed a young man sitting in the waiting area, watching everything with careful eyes. This young man was William Thompson, their son. At 32 years old, he had become very successful in the tech industry. He had come to surprise his parents by meeting them at the dealership. William had grown up watching his parents work extra jobs just to give him a good education. They had sacrificed so much, never buying anything nice for themselves. Today was supposed to be their day to finally enjoy the results of their hard work. And these salespeople had ruined it because of how they looked. William felt a cold anger growing inside him. He watched his parents leave, feeling both sad and determined. Instead of going after them immediately, he took out his phone and made a call. "John? It's William. I need the financial team ready first thing tomorrow morning. And get the lawyers too." He paused, looking at the sales manager who had dismissed his parents. "I'm about to buy a car dealership." That evening, William went to his parents' small house for dinner. They had always kept this modest home, even after he had offered to buy them a bigger one. "How was car shopping?" William asked casually as Emma served her famous shepherd's pie. James and Emma exchanged a look. "We're going to try somewhere else tomorrow," Emma said with a forced smile. "Premier Motors wasn't quite right for us." "What happened?" William asked, noticing the hurt in their eyes. Slowly, they told him the story. With each word, William's plan became clearer in his mind. He would make this right, not just for his parents, but for anyone who had ever been judged unfairly. "Don't worry," he told them as he left that night. "Things will look better tomorrow." They had no idea what their son was planning to do next. The next morning was bright and sunny. William woke up early in his hotel room. Unlike many rich people, he didn't show off his wealth. He lived simply despite having billions in his bank account. Today, however, he would use his money for something important. He put on his best suit, dark blue with a crisp white shirt. He looked in the mirror and straightened his tie. Today is for you, Mum and Dad, he said to himself. At 9 a.m. sharp, 3 black cars pulled up outside Premier Motors. William stepped out of the first car, followed by men and women in business suits carrying folders and laptops. They were his lawyers and financial team. Inside the dealership, Oliver was arranging brochures when he looked up and saw the group walk in. Something about their serious faces made him nervous. He quickly called for Richard, the sales manager. Richard hurried over with his biggest smile. Welcome to Premier Motors. How can I help you today? William looked at him coldly. This was the same man who had been rude to his parents yesterday. I'm here to speak with the owner, William said firmly. Richard blinked in surprise but quickly recovered. Of course, sir. May I tell him what this is regarding? He'll find out soon enough, William replied. Richard led the group to a large office at the back of the showroom. Inside was an older man with gray hair and an expensive watch. He stood up when they entered. George Wilson, the man said, extending his hand. I'm the owner of Premier Motors. What can I do for you, Mr. Thompson? William Thompson. William shook his hand but didn't smile. I'm here to make you an offer. George looked confused. An offer? For one of our vehicles? No, William said calmly. For your entire dealership. The room went silent. George stared at William, then started laughing. Young man, this dealership isn't for sale. We've been in business for 30 years. William nodded to one of his lawyers, who stepped forward and placed a folder on the desk. Inside you'll find our offer. 20% above market value. Cash. We can complete the deal today. George stopped laughing and opened the folder. His eyes widened as he saw the amount, several million pounds. This is unexpected, George stammered. Why would you want to buy Premier Motors? William's face remained serious. Yesterday, my parents came here to buy a car. They were ignored and treated poorly by your staff because of how they looked or the color of their skin. I was sitting in your waiting area and saw everything. George's face went pale. Your parents? James and Emma Thompson, William said. They've worked hard their entire lives. They taught me the value of respect and dignity. 2 things that seem to be missing in your business. George looked down at the papers, then back at William. I had no idea this happened. I'm sorry. I'm not interested in apologies, William said. I'm interested in change. And if you accept my offer, there will be 2 conditions. First, Richard and Oliver must be let go immediately. Their behavior cannot be tolerated. George glanced toward the showroom where Richard and Oliver were watching nervously through the glass walls. And the second condition? George asked quietly. The second condition is that this dealership will implement new training for all staff about treating every customer with respect, regardless of their appearance or background. One of William's lawyers spoke up. We've prepared all the necessary paperwork. We can complete the purchase today if you agree. George looked at the offer again. It was far more than the dealership was worth. He could retire comfortably with this money. I'll need time to think about it, George said. William shook his head. You have 1 hour. After that, the offer disappears. William and his team left the office and waited in the showroom. Word spread quickly among the employees. Something big was happening. Richard kept looking nervously at William, sensing his job might be in danger. Exactly 1 hour later, George walked out of his office. His face was serious but resigned. Mr. Thompson, I accept your offer. By lunchtime, the papers were signed. William Thompson was now the owner of Premier Motors. His first action was to call his parents. Mom, Dad, could you come down to Premier Motors this afternoon? There's something I'd like to show you. Emma sounded worried. Are you sure, dear? After yesterday. Trust me, William said. Today will be different. As he hung up, William looked around at the dealership, his dealership now. Soon he would show his parents that sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways. And he would make sure no one else ever felt the way they had felt walking out those doors yesterday. James and Emma arrived at Premier Motors that afternoon feeling nervous. They parked their old car in the same spot they had used yesterday. Emma smoothed her dress and took a deep breath. "I don't understand why William wants us to come back here," she said. James squeezed her hand. He said to trust him. "Let's see what this is about." They walked toward the entrance, expecting the same cold treatment as before. But something was different. As they approached the glass doors, they opened automatically, and a young woman greeted them with a warm smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson? Welcome. William is waiting for you inside." James and Emma looked at each other in surprise. How did this woman know their names? Inside, the dealership looked the same with its shiny cars and bright lights. But the atmosphere felt completely different. Every employee was smiling at them. And there, in the middle of the showroom, stood William with a huge grin on his face. "Mom! Dad," he called, walking over to hug them both. "I'm so glad you came." "William, what's going on?" Emma asked, looking around in confusion. "Why is everyone being so nice to us today?" William's smile grew even bigger. "Because they work for me now." James blinked. "What do you mean, they work for you?" "I bought the dealership this morning," William said simply. "Premier Motors now belongs to the Thompson family." Emma's hand flew to her mouth. "You bought the entire dealership? But why?" William led his parents to a quiet corner where 3 comfortable chairs were arranged. They sat down, and William leaned forward. "Because of what happened yesterday," he explained. "I was here to surprise you. I saw how they treated you, and it wasn't right." James shook his head in disbelief. "Son, you didn't have to buy an entire car dealership just because we had a bad experience." "It's not just about you," William said. "It's about everyone who comes through those doors. No one should feel unwelcome or judged the way you were." As they talked, George Wilson approached them nervously. He had agreed to stay for a few weeks to help with the transition. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," George said, his voice humble. "I want to apologize personally for your experience yesterday. I wasn't on the floor, but as the former owner now, the responsibility was mine." Emma nodded politely but didn't say anything. The hurt was still fresh. "Where are Richard and Oliver?" James asked, looking around for the 2 men who had dismissed them. "They no longer work here," William explained. "That was one of my conditions for the purchase." William stood up and gestured around the showroom. "Come, let me show you what else has changed." He led his parents around the dealership, introducing them to the staff. Everyone was polite and respectful. Some faces were new. William had already hired more diverse employees to better reflect the community. They stopped in front of the same sleek black sedan James and Emma had admired yesterday. "This is still the one you want, isn't it?" William asked. Emma ran her hand along the car's smooth hood. "It's beautiful, but William, we can't accept such an expensive gift." William shook his head. "It's not a gift. You saved for 10 years for this car. You'll buy it, just as you planned." He smiled at his parents. "The only difference is now you'll get the respect you deserve while doing it." A young salesman named Mark approached them with the car keys. "Would you like to take it for a test drive, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson?" Mark asked. James looked at his son, then at the keys being offered to him. Slowly, he reached out and took them. His eyes were wet with tears he tried to hide. "Yes," he said. "We would like that very much." As James and Emma drove off in their dream car, William watched from the showroom window. He felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond just helping his parents. Today was the beginning of something bigger. Later that evening, after James and Emma had completed the paperwork for their new car, the 3 Thompsons stood together in what was now William's office. "What will you call the dealership now?" Emma asked, looking at the Premier Motors sign visible through the window. William smiled. I was thinking of Integrity Automobiles. A place where everyone is treated with dignity, regardless of how they look or dress. James put his arm around his son's shoulders. I'm proud of you, William. Not because you're successful or wealthy, but because you still remember what really matters. As the sun set outside, casting golden light across the showroom full of cars, the Thompson family stood together, united by something stronger than business or money, their belief that every person deserves respect. 3 months passed quickly. Integrity Automobiles was no longer just a car dealership, it had become a symbol of change in the community. William had kept his office simple. Unlike the fancy space that George Wilson had used, William's office had comfortable chairs and family photos. Today, he sat at his desk looking at the monthly sales report with a satisfied smile. The door opened, and Lisa, the new sales manager, walked in. Lisa had worked at another dealership for years but had never been given a chance to lead until William hired her. The numbers look good, William said, holding up the report. Lisa nodded. It's not just the sales that are up. Customer satisfaction scores are the highest they've ever been. Outside the office window, William could see the showroom floor. It was busy with customers and salespeople. Everyone looked relaxed and happy, very different from the tense atmosphere he had seen on that first day with his parents. Have you seen this? Lisa asked, handing William a local newspaper. There on the business page was a story about Integrity Automobiles. The headline read, Local dealership sets new standard for customer service. William read the article with pride. It told the story of how the dealership had changed and mentioned the new policies William had put in place: no commission-based sales, equal treatment for all customers, and community outreach programs. Your parents will be pleased, Lisa said. William smiled. Speaking of my parents, they should be here any minute. We're having lunch together. Right on time, James and Emma Thompson walked into the dealership. They no longer felt nervous coming through those doors. Now they entered with confidence, greeted warmly by the staff who knew them by name. James drove their new black sedan, which Emma kept spotlessly clean. They parked it proudly in front of the building. There they are, William said, walking out to meet them. Emma hugged her son. The place looks busy today. It's been like this all week, William replied. People are spreading the word about how we do business here. They walked through the showroom toward the back exit where they would go to lunch. As they passed, William noticed a family looking at cars. The parents wore simple clothes, much like his own parents had worn that day. A salesperson was giving them his full attention, explaining features without asking about their budget first. That's Tom, William told his parents quietly. He used to work at a factory until it closed. This is his first job in sales, and he's one of our best. James nodded approvingly. You're not just selling cars here. You're changing lives. At lunch in a small cafe down the street, the Thompson family talked about the future. I've been thinking about expanding, William said between bites of his sandwich. There are other dealerships like Premier Motors was, places where people are judged by their appearance or accent rather than treated with respect. Emma looked concerned. You can't buy every business that treats people poorly, William. No, but I can start a movement, William replied. I've created a foundation that will help other businesses change their practices. We'll offer training and support. James set down his cup of tea. That's a big dream, son. I learned from the best, William said, smiling at his parents. You two taught me that everyone deserves dignity and respect. Now I have the resources to make that happen on a larger scale. After lunch, they returned to the dealership. William had a surprise waiting. In the center of the showroom was a new plaque on the wall. It read, Integrity Automobiles, founded on the principles of respect and dignity taught by James and Emma Thompson. Emma's eyes filled with tears when she saw it. James stood straighter, his chest swelling with pride. We never expected anything like this, Emma said, touching the plaque gently. We just wanted to buy a car. You deserve so much more, William said. This place exists because of you, not just because of what happened that day, but because of everything you taught me growing up. As they stood there, a young couple walked into the dealership looking nervous and unsure, just as James and Emma had looked 3 months ago. William watched as Tom greeted them warmly, offering them coffee and making them feel welcome. "See that?" William said quietly to his parents. "That's your legacy right there." James put his arm around his son's shoulders. "No, William. That's your legacy now." As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, lighting up the showroom, the Thompson family stood together witnessing the simple but powerful act of one human being treating another with kindness and respect, proving that sometimes the most meaningful changes start with the smallest acts of decency. 1 year had passed since William bought the dealership. Integrity Automobiles was now famous throughout the region. People drove from other towns just to shop there because they knew they would be treated fairly. On this special day, William had invited everyone to the dealership for an anniversary celebration. The showroom was decorated with balloons and a large banner that read 1 year of integrity. James and Emma arrived early to help prepare. Emma brought her homemade cakes that everyone loved. James wore a new suit that made him look distinguished with his gray hair. "I can't believe it's been a year already," Emma said as she arranged cake slices on a tray. William was busy greeting guests as they arrived. Many were customers who had bought cars during the past year. Others were employees and their families. There were also some important visitors. One of these visitors was Robert, the owner of another car dealership in town. He walked up to William with a serious face. "I have to admit, Thompson, I thought your business model would fail," Robert said. "Treating everyone the same regardless of how rich they look? Not pushing for bigger sales? I gave you 6 months at best." William smiled politely. "And what do you think now?" Robert shook his head in amazement. "You've changed the game. My own customers have started asking why we don't do business like Integrity. That's why I'm here today." This was exactly what William had hoped for. His plan was working, not just to run one good dealership, but to change how all businesses treated people. At noon, William called for everyone's attention. He stood on a small platform beside his parents. "Thank you all for coming today," he began. 1 year ago, something bad happened in this building. My parents were judged by how they looked, not who they were. But out of that moment, something good was born. The crowd listened quietly as William continued. "Today, I'm proud to announce the next step. We're launching the Integrity Business Foundation. This foundation will help other businesses learn how to treat all customers with respect and dignity." Applause filled the room. William raised his hand for quiet. "And I'm even more proud to announce that our first partner in this project is Wilson Motors." A surprised murmur went through the crowd. Wilson Motors was owned by George Wilson, the former owner of this very dealership. George stepped up onto the platform. He looked different now, more relaxed without the stress of running a business. "When William bought this place from me, I was angry at first," George admitted. "But then I watched what he did with it. I saw how treating people with respect actually made the business more successful, not less." George turned to face James and Emma. "I owe you both an apology for what happened a year ago. And I owe your son thanks for teaching an old man a new way of doing business." Emma smiled warmly at George. The hurt of that day was long gone, replaced by pride in what her son had created. After the speeches, people mingled and enjoyed Emma's cakes. William noticed a familiar face in the crowd, Oliver, one of the salesmen who had been fired when William took over. William walked over to him. "I'm surprised to see you here." Oliver looked down at his feet. "I almost didn't come. But I needed to say something to you and your parents." "They're right over there," William said, pointing to where James and Emma were chatting with some guests. Oliver took a deep breath and walked over to them. William followed, curious about what would happen. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," Oliver said nervously. "I'm Oliver. I worked here before the change." James recognized him immediately. "Yes, I remember. I want to apologize for how I treated you that day, Oliver said, his voice shaking a little. I was wrong. Very wrong. Emma's eyes softened. Thank you for saying that, Oliver. There's more, Oliver continued. After I lost my job here, I had a hard time. But it made me think about how I had been treating people. Now I work at a community center helping people find jobs. I learned from my mistake. William watched this exchange with a full heart. This was even better than he had hoped for, not just changing businesses, but changing people too. Later, as the celebration was ending, William stood with his parents by their black sedan, which still looked as good as new. Did you ever imagine that buying a car would lead to all this? William asked them. James laughed. Never in my wildest dreams. Emma took both their hands in hers. The car was just a thing. What you've created here is so much more. You've built a place where people feel valued. As they watched the sunset over the dealership sign, William knew this was just the beginning. The story that had started with rejection had transformed into one of respect, dignity, and hope, spreading outward like ripples in a pond, changing one heart at a time.